Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'll be reviewing and paging through White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game from Seattle Hill Games. Is this a fantastic flashback to the fantasy role playing of the mid 1970s? Or is this yet another forgettable OSR retro clone? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I will be reviewing White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game from Seattle Hill Games. But before I do, I want to thank all of you out there for sending along kind thoughts and prayers regarding my recent triple bypass surgery. It's been just over a month since the surgery. I am getting a lot of my strength back. You can probably tell that my voice is coming back as well. It's not as scratchy and rough and kind of weak as it had been in the past. So that's getting better. And of course, the doctors tell me I am doing exceptionally well for somebody who had triple bypass surgery. So big thumbs up. Thank you so much for those kind thoughts and prayers. They really are appreciated. So that said, today I am going to review and page through White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game from Seattle Hill Games. It's written by Charlie Mason with artwork provided by William McAusland. This 144-page book is available in hardcover for $24.99 or in PDF absolutely free over at DriveThruRPG. You can also do what I did and score the soft cover through Amazon for $4.30. Yes, you heard that correctly, $4.30. Let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got White Box. I am not going to refer to this as fantastic medieval adventure game too often because that is a bit of a mouthful. So, as I mentioned, I picked this up on Amazon. The ad, the listing, I guess we will say, on Amazon showed a completely different cover. There is a like red dragon cover that you would actually see over on DriveThruRPG. So that's how it was advertised, but I received this black and white cover, and I got to point out, I like this a lot more than the dragon cover. So I'm happy. I'm very pleased. Because I got it on Amazon, obviously that means no one from Seattle Hill Games has provided either I or anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang any sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. There's far too many people out there providing reviews of tabletop games that are simply paid advertisements, and that is not how the Gaming Gang has ever operated. All right, let's take a look at the back because it says, White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game. Unleash your imagination to dream of other worlds where you role-play heroic characters and go on adventures just like in the days of old. Slay a dragon. Sometimes even the most reluctant adventurer will hear the call of the wilderness and set out to slay a dragon, or at least steal its treasures. Explore the unknown. There's no limit to the lands you can explore and magic you can discover. Fight on. So grab your sword, mace, or wand and travel beyond the borderlands and brace yourself to face great and terrible monsters. And remember, no matter what happens, fight on. All right, let's jump on in. So you might be wondering, okay, so what is White Box? What is this? It's OSR, I understand that, but what exactly is it? So, of course, it is a retro clone. So, I do want to point out it is a retro clone. It is essentially repackaging original Dungeons and Dragons, which here it's called White Box, but let's be honest, the original Dungeons and Dragons was in a wooden box, and then it was a brown box, and then it was a white box. So I actually had the white box D&D. I want to say, I think I bought it in like 1982 because it was still on sale. You could still purchase the white box back in the early 80s. And I had a copy, and I really do wish I still had that. But I don't. C'est la vie. So this also really does owe a lot of gratitude, I guess we will say, to Swords and Wizardry White Box, because that was, as far as I understand, that was kind of the first retro clone that really kind of repackaged OD&D, or at least the first 3 books of original Dungeons and Dragons, which of course came in that white box. Problem is, it wasn't the most intuitive or easily grasped presentation. Now, granted, it had cleaned up OD&D quite a bit because, as I remember, it was also not the most intuitive to figure out. So what White Box does is it takes it one step further. And one of the first things I'm going to mention is I love the line art throughout. Really, really nicely done. I am a big fan of William McAusland's artwork anyway, so I was super excited to see a lot of it throughout this book as well. So OD&D is very easy to wrap your head around. This is not Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is not D&D 5e. This is pretty simple. This comes from the old mindset of rulings as opposed to rules. But there are still some core mechanics that modern Dungeons and Dragons players will recognize. So first off, you got our attributes. So you're going to roll your 3 6-sided dice, and you're going to get a score anywhere from 3 to 18. And you've got your strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and constitution. So one thing that's a little different is with your attribute score modifiers. So usually we'll have a much bigger swing, sometimes -3 to +3. Here, we've only got -1 to +1 as our modifiers. We have experience bonuses for most of the classes. If you have an intelligence, well, I shouldn't say intelligence. If you have the attribute that is kind of the main attribute for that class, if you've got a 15 or higher, you'll get a bonus. So here we got quick descriptions of what exactly are these attributes as well. Talking about hit points, alignment, character retirement. Now we do have up to level 10 for the 3 classes. We do have an optional class as well. Once again, you're going to recognize it if you are familiar with old original Dungeons and Dragons. So we've got the cleric, who does not get a spell at first level. That is super old school. Talking about the cleric here and turning undead. We've got the fighter. We've got the magic user. And we've got the optional thief. Oh, come on. You knew that was coming. So it's going to explain each of these character classes. As you can see, everything's very concise, right to the point. This does have a nice presentation to it. It's not super dry, which I definitely do appreciate. It's not necessarily conversational, but it is not real dry and mechanical. So that I appreciate. So we have our character races. And we do have races class, and it's been a long time since I checked out OD&D, but I don't recall you being able to utilize the races as classes as the main class. So as an example, each of these classes, you get to choose, for an example, like the dwarf can choose between the fighter or thief. So they can be used as a fighter or a thief, plus they also get the bonuses of the dwarf. With the elf gets to choose on a daily basis if they're going to be a fighter or magic user. And then we have the halfling, and the halfling is a fighter or a thief. I think this is a little different. I think, once again, let me point out, it's been a long time since I looked at OD&D. You'll also find optional rules throughout this book as well. I got to point out, sometimes the optional rules are presented a little confusingly. Personally, I would have rather seen all the optional rules in a separate chapter, because it might throw off some folks as far as, okay, well, sometimes you'll see, well, here's an optional rule, here's another optional rule after the rule itself. It's kind of like, well, which one should take precedent here? Because once again, rule number one is rules don't matter, right? This is your game. Make it what you want. So we got some equipment, talking about armor class. So as far as our armor class, we've got ascending armor class, which if you play any of the D20 fantasy role-playing games these days, you're very familiar with ascending armor class. It tends to be very easy for people to figure out as well. So you've got two options. You can do the usual way, the OD&D way, or you also have the option for the ascending armor class. So we get into playing the game, talking about experience points, you get for killing monsters, but mainly you get experience points for treasure, because it's more important the goodies you're getting, the Monty Hallism that's going on. So as opposed to, fighting the monsters. And of course, the old school Renaissance, a lot of the fantasy role-playing games do focus more on player skill than character skill. And of course, different ways to actually get through encounters without having to resort to combat, because combat is very deadly in these old school Renaissance games. So as you can see, we've got just real quick, I don't want to say bullet points, but we usually get about a paragraph, sometimes a couple of paragraphs about each of these items here. So like lights, secret doors, listening at doors, traps, finding secret doors and traps. And I love that. I love that it's not page after page after page of just diving into minutia, which I know a lot of people love, tons of crunch in the role-playing games. I get it. I just am not one of them anymore. I like nice rules light, and we can adapt it as we go. So as an example, we've got our combat here. So we're only going to see a handful of pages devoted to combat. Most games these days, you'd have 20, 30 pages or more devoted to combat. And here we even have optional rules as well. So we've got optional rules as far as initiative and the combat sequence. Talking about our ascending armor class. Healing, binding wounds, melee attacks, missile attacks, morale. So normally what would happen is that, and there's some options in here as well, that old school, the magic users and clerics would have to prepare their spell first. So they would have to prepare a spell in the combat round before they cast the spell. So, of course, if they took any kind of damage, if they were distracted by anything in between, then they would lose the spell. That is an option here. So I like that. I like that quite a lot. So we've got different saving throws. So we have a saving throw matrix, or we also have just the single saving throw. So go back to the character classes. So as an example, right? So we've got a first level magic user, it's a saving throw of 15. Now, you can have bonuses depending on what you're saving against, but, and this is a swords and wizardry thing, just a single saving throw for the character makes things easier than having all variety of, let's go to the matrix right here, death, poison, wands, raise, paralyze, dragon breath, spells and staffs. So, and it shows, of course, here it's by class. So we had spells and magic, and something I'm always a big fan of is just short, to the point descriptions of the spells. And yes, I know people love all their spell information, and so do I, but I don't necessarily need 2 or 3 pages for a single spell. That's just, as a game master, that is just too much information that I need to process and have in my head. So we've got cleric spells, magic user spells. We have more magic user spells than cleric spells, which is pretty much the norm. I've had people ask me why that tends to be the case. And the only reason I can really think of early on in the design process of these fantasy role-playing games is that the cleric is a pretty decent fighter, whereas the magic user is not. So to kind of balance things, the cleric has fewer spells than the magic user does. So we got our spell descriptions, and these are in alphabetical order. So it's going to tell us what is it. So for an example, Charm Monster is a level 4 magic user spell. It's got a range of 60 feet. Duration is until dispelled. And this spell operates in the same manner as Charm Person, but can affect more powerful monsters. Up to 3d6 monsters of fewer than 3 hit dice are affected. Boom, right to the point, telling me what it does. Do I honestly really need to know what sort of materials the magic user needs, or is this going to be a spell that's cast just by using your hands, or do you have to speak, or do you have to dance around? I don't necessarily need to know that. I know, once again, just me. I come from kind of an old school mentality. So we got a lot of spells. So I definitely like that. You're not going to find a bunch of like really off the wall spells. These are pretty much taken from original Dungeons and Dragons. So we've got running the game. This is kind of pointed towards the game master, which I like. Talking about experience points, advancement. We've got the underworld and wilderness adventures. Got some tables here. Kind of flip through those. We've got monsters. We have a good bestiary here. We've got a good variety of creatures, as well as their various different, we've got our, hang on, I think I just passed it. We've got our monster attack rolls to make life easier for you as the game master. So showing different hit dice and what it requires as far as regular armor class or ascending armor class. So I like that quite a bit. Of course, some of these monsters will get a bonus to their die roll. And we've got artwork, not for all of them, but we've got enough artwork sprinkled throughout. So I like that also. So as you can see, there are quite a few monsters that are part of this bestiary. And then there's discussion about, well, what if you want to make the monsters tougher? Or what if you want to create your monsters? Then we got treasures. So we're going to talk about regular mundane treasure. We're also going to talk about magic potions and magic items as well. We've got scrolls, magic weapons and armor, miscellaneous magic items. So we've got quite a lot of page count devoted to our spells, our monsters, and magic items. And really, the rules to play the game take, let's say, less than 20 pages, probably closer to about 15, to be very honest. Just kind of going through here. And we've got some specific magic items as well. I have to point out, I am one of these sort of game masters where my magic items, I like them to be unique. I happen to run fantasy role-playing games that magic is rare. It's dangerous. I have kind of a swords and sorcery vibe to the fantasy role-playing games that I tend to run. A little bit, almost kind of a bit of a fairy tale vibe to them as well. And I am not one of these people who does a lot of book magic items. So I am not one of these people where it's like, oh, yes, so you found a +1 short sword. Snore. So I like how we got a little section there if you want to jot down your own house rules. So you've got that. And then we've got our character sheet, which obviously enough you can easily download as well. You can download it. There's one on Drive Through RPG, absolutely free you can get, or you can kind of create your own. And we get our open game license, and that is White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game from Seattle Hill Games. So let me swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to provide some final thoughts and give this a review score. I really like this book. Number one, if you want to get the PDF, it's absolutely free. Kind of like Basic Fantasy, another role-playing game that I am really high on. I think is really, really well done. This is a bit different, though, because remember, this is original Dungeons and Dragons cleaned up. And if you have any interest in the history of fantasy role-playing games, you want to give this a peek. So once again, absolutely free if you want to get the PDF. This soft cover, like I've got in my hand, is available at Amazon for $4.30. Next time you're making your purchases at Amazon, even if you don't have Prime and you're over $25, throw it into the cart, get it shipped to you for free. You cannot go wrong for less than $5. If you are new to fantasy role-playing games and you don't want all the muss and fuss of the modern style game where you've got all these different races, you've got all these different feats and abilities and all these rules about different things, if you just want to kind of boil it down to the heart of old school role-playing game, this is a fantastic pickup. It really, really is. I do have a couple of minor quibbles. One being that I wish the optional rules had been placed in a separate chapter, because they kind of, in some situations, and there are quite a few optional rules, in some situations they kind of wash out with all the rest. So you're getting, here's the original rule as it's presented here in White Box. Here's an optional rule. Here's an optional rule. And it's kind of like, I don't know why I'd use any of the three, especially if you're new to role-playing games. So if the optional rules had been in a separate chapter, I would have liked to have seen that more. That said, I also find it kind of odd, and like, I don't remember this in original Dungeons and Dragons, where, say, if you've got the elf chooses on a daily basis, are they going to be a fighter? Are they going to be a magic user? I seem to have recalled that the elf was kind of a composite fighter magic user, but that was the class. The elf was the class. It wasn't, all right, well, you decide on this day of the adventure, what are they going to be? So I thought that was kind of odd as well. But then again, maybe I'm just misremembering original Dungeons and Dragons. But like I said, very, very minor quibbles. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I give White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game, a very, very solid recommendation, a 9 out of 10. I think it's that good, and it's a bargain. So once again, if you are looking to learn more about how fantasy role-playing games were played in the mid-1970s, right at the beginning, this is a fantastic buy. Or if you're looking to run fantasy role-playing games that are very rules light and OSR, you can't go wrong. This is fantastic. All right, that is it for this time out. Once again, if you happen to like this video, by all means, give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell. Not only will you learn when I upload new videos, such as this review, I'll also tell you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and more. Of course, I also include a first look at said tabletop games on the Dispatch. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com, my home website, for the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, here's hoping that you enjoy plenty of great gaming with your very own gang. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel? Or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch? Or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel? And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.